I've just started, so good morning to everybody that's just joining us. I can see lots of people loading in, so I'll just give it a couple of minutes before we kick things off, but good morning and welcome. So we are 1 minute past past. I will start, but lots of people are still joining us and they're welcome to do so. But good morning and welcome to our Make UK Manufacturing Our Recovery through Inclusion virtual event this morning. My name is Chris Cork and I'm one of the regional membership managers at Make UK, the manufacturers organisation. And again, thank you very much for joining us this morning. There are a large number of manufacturers joining us this morning to discuss a really important topic on acting on equality, diversity and inclusion within our businesses, both as it's the right thing to do, but also to represent the society which we're all living in, but also to ensure that the sector can remain an attractive place to work, widen the talent pool of which we're accessing in the labour market, and in turn improve our business and sector performance, which can really ensure that we're successfully achieving things more strategically across whether it be digital transformation or reaching net zero and so on and so forth. So the agenda for this morning's session is that we'll be hearing from Make UK's most recent policy report into equality, diversity, inclusion with the report's author, before moving into one of our HR and legal experts on considerations and practical advice on how to change ED&I in your workplace. We'll also then move to a quick poll to feedback and reflect and hear from you guys joining us this morning on where your views are and where your barriers or perhaps successes are. And then we're also fabulously joined by two Make UK members this morning from Westcombe Engineering and G&B Electronic Designs, who have already taken ED&I incredibly serious and also have some impressive results and experiences to share with everybody as well. So please do note we are recording this session and you're more than welcome to ask questions and comment and feedback on things that we're discussing this morning, either in the chat function or the Q&A bar as well, which you can both access by the bottom of your screen. So we will be kicking off first, and I'm really pleased that Nina, our author of the Manufacturing Our Recovery Through Inclusion, joins us this morning. I'm conscious I'm sharing your screen slides, Nina, so I will pull those up now and let you take us through what the report has been telling everybody about where we're at in manufacturing on this topic.
Thank you so much, Chris. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Nina Griff, I'm Senior Policy Manager at Make UK, and I'm going to just take you through some findings from our report and talk about equality, diversity, and inclusion. Equality, diversity and inclusion is an important subject for UK manufacturing and for Make UK. When we were talking to our members for the past 2 months, what we also find out that the subject is important, but also difficult for businesses to talk about. What we often are saying is and advising to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And when we talk about engineering the future, what we mean is to put people in the center, at the center of innovation and building resilience for the future. What we mean by this is we want to create workplaces which are truly represent the section of our society and our customers. What we also mean is that all the employees are respected and each employee is respected, and we're creating the places, inclusive places, workplaces of belonging for each employee to be themselves. What we set out, we have set out a plan to understand the subject matter And early this year, we started a conversation with our members through a series of roundtables, and we produced a report in May, which was launched in June. We also created an EDI working group, and internally we have created a strategy to promote EDI within Make UK, together with members to champion EDI throughout the sector. Next slide. As Chris mentioned earlier, there's a lot of evidence and reasons why businesses should get the ED&I strategy or some kind of a plan, and why we have started the work and what we were looking for. So while talking to the government officials when we were discussing any policies around making businesses more resilient for the future, and they were asking about the diversity of workforce within the manufacturing sector, we just didn't have the data, and we didn't know what our sector looks like. So this is the reason why we started the project. Also, the UK can no longer rely on the EU workforce, which might exaggerate the skills shortages. So employers will have to look into different ways how to attract new talent. Changes within the global workforce. By 2027, 75% of the workforce will be Gen Z or millennials. And their key value, one of the key values, is for employer to be an inclusive employer. So this is a really key part of for businesses to focus and to look into as well. Women and ethnic minorities are underrepresented in many sectors of the economy, and we know they are underrepresented in manufacturing as well. And this is why we wanted to have more details around that. As mentioned before, we created an EDI working group. This is a group of about 20 members, very diverse members from a really small businesses to large global manufacturers. When we meet about 4 times a year, we share experience and knowledge. We identify the best practice for the manufacturing sector. On the subject, we identify the views of manufacturing industry. We want to know their priorities. And the group acts as a sounding board for the Make UK policy work, and the members are our ambassadors for the ED&I messaging. So what does the average manufacturing workforce look like? So based on a survey of 170 manufacturers and discussions with over 100 members of ours during the roundtables and focus groups that we held, average age of manufacturing workforce is 36, between 40, and it's a male, white male. And looking at the aging manufacturing workforce and many people planning to retire, another statistics, that there is a need for attracting new talent and young talent, but only 2% of manufacturers' average workforce age is below 30 years old. When you look at the gender, on average, women make up to 28% of the manufacturing workforce, and they are 80% of women are sitting on the company boards. With the national statistics across all the economy, that number is about 30%. There is a big occupational segregation within the manufacturing sector. Only 12% of skilled trades, technical roles go to women, and only 8%, even less, professional skills, professional jobs like chartered engineer go to women, are taken by women. Also, like about 40% of jobs like admin and clerical are taken by women. When we look at the ethnic minority groups, on average at manufacturing sector, they make up of 18% of the manufacturing workforce, and BAME representation is really low across all level jobs. Only 3% from executive director roles, which are the decision-making roles, to 4% apprenticeship take-up, and 6% of graduates. The companies that have ED&I strategies or tend to have diverse workforce. So the companies who have the ED9 strategies or plan to have, so doing something like trying to implement something or thinking about implementing an EDI strategy, have more diverse workforce. And if you look at the third data on the companies who don't have anything, it's a really little percentage of diverse workforce. And what we don't really know, what is it that influenced that number? Is it the strategy or is it the workforce? We're not sure about that, but this is definitely the effect of work that the companies are doing around that subject. And when we look at the ED9 strategy, that 35% of respondents have an EDI strategy or something similar in their businesses, and 31 are planning to do an EDI strategy. And when we look at the size of the companies, you can see that the large companies have 45% and 45% of businesses within that group are planning to do. So this is a big proportion. But if we look at the medium-sized companies, 60% already have an EDI strategy. So this is very positive. But then the kind of downside of it, the tiny, small manufacturing businesses are the ones that are struggling to get on the EDI journey. And we know there are many barriers like lack of resources that they are hitting. So this might be reflecting in that number. When we were talking to our members and manufacturers throughout the past couple of years, what they said, months, sorry, what they mentioned is that there is a need for more training, and they don't know where to start, they don't know how to start. And we have created within Make UK a service offering, but I'm not going to talk about it. We have Sharon, maybe she knows more if she will want to mention that. So we have also learned that this is a marathon and not a sprint. This is a long-term project, and we will need the support from the government. And what we have asked, can I have a next slide, Chris? What we have asked the government in the report, why on the feedback from our members and from manufacturers, from the manufacturing members, we asking government to publish accessible workforce data for locality, for the businesses to know their regions and how it look like to benchmark themselves. We are asking to provide further guidance on the data collection so that this does not act as a barrier. Quite a lot of manufacturers are doing gender pay gap reporting, and a lot are doing it voluntarily. But for the small businesses, there's definitely a barrier, as they would like to do it voluntarily, but they need more help with some guidance. Also, providing further guidance on data collection. I kind of stepped into the gender pay gap reporting, but data collection. So there is one of the top barriers for manufacturers to get on that ED&I journey and to commit to change, which is the data collection. So there's problems with GDPR and asking people about the data and protected characteristics. So more guidance from the government will be definitely helpful. Also committing to work with industry on policies around flexible working, returning to work, and childcare is one of the key issues. When we were looking into different countries and checking internationally what other countries are doing, which countries are good, and according to World Economic Forum, when they did the gender pay gap across the globe, and Denmark is one of the top countries who's doing it well, and the women participation in the labor market is really high. The key factor is that the government spends a lot of money on childcare and social care. Next slide. What we have done in terms of helping the members, we published and created guiding principles for manufacturers. When we commit to defining our ambition, publishing through the statement. We commit to creating a truly inclusive culture by building a workforce that is reflective of the working population. We commit to sharing best practice with our peers and learning from different businesses. And this is what we have done internally. I'm going to show you later on the other slides our statement. We just did a short video. What we have also done, we published and we shared a detailed ED9 action plan that you can see in the report. There's more than you can see in the picture, but the plan is to be agreed by the leadership. This is one of the key things when we want to create a change, that it needs to be agreed by the leadership team, and they need to commit to it. The leadership team must personally commit and be accountable for its delivery. And all the stages of that plan are interchangeable and will run alongside each other. And now I can show you the Make UK. Next slide, please. We have published the statement together with the report, and the aim is to create an open and welcoming workplace. And Chris will play the video. I don't think we can hear the music. And we're asking, are you in? We just want our employees to join and members to join into the inclusive Make UK journey. Sorry, there was a nice music background with the video, but you weren't able to hear that. This is all from me. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina, and it's well worth saying that the report is also available on our website for a bit more of a deep dive, which I will pop in the chat function in just a minute. But I guess that's a really good overview of where the sector's at and some of the barriers and some of the important things to implement an ED&I strategy or improve that in our workplaces. But of course, some of those things aren't that easy. Where do you start? What are kind of practical tips and guidance? And that's why I'm delighted to be joined by Sharon, one of Make UK's HR legal experts, will be able to provide some of that guidance, help, and where to start, or where you are on your journey and what more you can be doing. So if you'd like to share your screen, Sharon.
Chris. Okay, thanks, Chris. So good morning, everyone. And as Chris said, I'm Sharon Brought, and I'm head up our HR and legal commercial services in Make UK. So essentially, I lead a team of HR and legal professionals who support businesses and our members with all elements of HR and employment laws. So in relation to equality, diversity and inclusion, as Nina's mentioned, we do find a lot of our members know and understand sort of the basic principles of equality, diversity and inclusion, but they're not sure what's next. So in this session, I'm going to work through some tips and ideas to support your journey. Okay, so I thought it'd be useful to start with the fundamentals of equality, diversity and inclusion. Our business environments are consisting of diverse workforce, and as organisations continue to focus on respecting and appreciating our differences, the key question is still, how do organisations enhance and leverage these diverse perspectives and backgrounds to drive business success and innovation, and ultimately embed equality, diversity and inclusion in the workplace? So I thought it was useful to just refresh ourselves on the fundamentals, and just so we can understand how your approach is going to need to be structured. So this might seem a little bit obvious, but I just thought just stating specifically equality, diversity, and then I'll move on to inclusion, and just highlighting the differences was probably quite an important point to make when you're looking at how you tackle this. So obviously equality is probably the most obvious definition, but it's really the opportunity for everyone to be treated equally and of parity with their co-workers in work generally, and obviously in every opportunity. Diversity then is obviously the recognition that people are different, and that goes beyond just the protected characteristics that most people sort of immediately think of around sort of gender, ethnicity and age. And these are the areas that can bring people together into different groupings. So that might be family, work experience, education. And then that sort of leads nicely onto this slide, which I thought sort of quite clearly represents where you're trying to get to in this equality, diversity and inclusion journey. So diversity is clearly the who, as it says there, it's the different pieces of the puzzle on the table, and the inclusion piece is therefore how they all fit together to create that sense of belonging. So individuals then feel accepted as themselves and valued as a result of work. You can see there, obviously, to get from diversity and inclusion is that nurturing process, but obviously diversity is more, like Nina brought up, the sort of monitoring, the data capture, that side of things. The groupings that I mentioned previously then become that connection to work and begin to build that psychological contract that many people refer to. And these are obviously really key parts to understand when you're trying to put your strategy together. So this is something that Make UK have used as within our internal action plan, and some of the data that sort of Nina shared. But I thought this was quite, again, an important point to make. You know, diversity is a fact and inclusion is behaviour. So they are two interconnected concepts. You know, diversity is the makeup of an organisation, and inclusion is how the contributions and perspective of the workforce are heard, valued and integrated. It's all about facilitating and fostering the workforce sense of belonging, bringing their whole selves to work and having a voice which resonates and is valued. The diversity inclusion, the pursuit of that, is not just about doing the right thing. It's about diversity of thought, inclusion of people's talents. So then you're enhancing business growth and reputation. And obviously it's not wrong to kind of look at the commercial benefit of those kind of responsible social aims that you have. The one quote that I thought was quite interesting is, you cannot beat yourself being you. So obviously if you as an individual turn up to work and you're yourself, you're the best version of yourself if you're allowed to be that. So I suppose when you're starting on this journey, wherever you are on that journey, it's important to ask yourself what sort of working environment does motivate you. And what is being asked is to create a culture that motivates everyone and gets the best out of everyone. A few other key things just to remember is that equality and diversity are undermined without inclusion. People do want their differences respected, which is obviously where Nina said about collating the data, reviewing that. But people want to feel part of something rather than singled out because of their differences. And having a diverse workforce doesn't necessarily create or represent an inclusive workforce. You've got to work on the two things together. And I suppose it's a little bit of a chicken and egg scenario, but I think what we've found with a lot of different companies we've spoken to, and I'm sure Laura and Andrew will touch on how they've approached this themselves, but obviously if you can foster an inclusive workforce, even if you don't have the diverse workforce, that should follow, because people will see it's a good place to work, people enjoy working there, and then that diverse workforce should be a little bit easier to attract. And interesting, Glassdoor just recently published some results of their top CEO based in the UK, and that's based obviously on the feedback that they had via their site. And transparency, willingness to change and openness to ideas were among the top reasons given for the CEOs that came top. And obviously that's all characteristic of a truly inclusive workplace that's going to be led from the top. So what steps can you take? So I'm going to sort of run through these key steps here that hopefully will help you support your journey on this. So I think Nina's obviously mentioned, she showed you our Make UK commitment, but the first one and the obvious one clearly is stating and communicating your organisation's commitment to EDI, whether that's in your company mission statement, your core values or your goals. It doesn't only demonstrate your commitment to your workforce, but it also enables you to attract more diverse future employees. and obviously ultimately makes your organisation accountable for its actions. It's really important, obviously, though, that you follow through on these commitments by reflecting and respecting the values. An example of a mission statement with inclusion at its heart is outlined. So you'll see underneath there's a bit of a strap line around creating an inclusive workplace culture, and that's potentially one that you could take and use yourself. The next step, I'd say, is making sure you have an equality, diversity and inclusion strategy and action plan. What we'll do is, when Nina's shared reference to Make UK's commitment, we have got a draft action plan on our website as well, so that's something that you can probably have a look at after this session as a bit of a sample and an idea, and I'll take you through some details of that later on in this session. But the importance of that strategy is really about retaining and attracting talent and driving those innovative results. It's obviously should conform to the company's commitment that was mentioned before on promoting EDI, obviously in line with the Equality Act, but also around best practice, but taking into account your strategic objectives and values, but also obviously the main aim is that equality and fairness in your workplace. And then the final one on this page, looking at empathetic leadership and positive role models. Probably anyone in HR will kind of have heard the fact or been given the mantle to work on EDI, but clearly EDI is not just a HR initiative. It needs every leader, manager and supervisor to buy in, and everything they do or say is embraced with diversity and inclusion. Obviously, in that way, your equality, diversity and inclusion practices are going to thrive. I like this quote here where it says, leaders lead in the moment, they know the way and they show the way. I think that's really impactful of what is an expectation of the leadership team and how they react and how they show they are role models in the organisation. So next steps then. So even though we've mentioned obviously making sure the leadership team are engaged and they're on board with the journey, a top-down approach isn't enough. They don't necessarily drive commitments, it's more compliance, and they don't necessarily win the hearts and minds of individuals. I know that's a phrase that some people might love or hate, but it's obviously really important on this journey that individuals are with you on that journey rather than just being dragged along, kicking and screaming. So every individual is going to have to see, understand and embrace their role in that company culture. And when I mention culture, that's really important, because when we talk about equality, diversity and inclusion, all of those things are essentially creating your culture. And obviously within HR, a lot of people talk about, creating a great culture. It's a really difficult thing. It's not something you can do overnight. It needs all these little individual pieces to create the culture that you're looking for. So there's a few different ways you can look at this, and some examples of things other companies have done. A really good example of one of our members was creating a working group that when the board had put together the initial strategy, then put together a group of individuals from across the workforce that could apply to be part of the EDI working group. So they had to actually physically submit an application to be part of that group, to say what they could bring to the party, what commitment they gave to EDI, and then they were put on the working group and helped shape that for the business. Anyone that wasn't able to be part of that group, because actually they had a heck of a lot of people apply, were then given roles to work on smaller projects and other smaller pieces, and just generally work as ambassadors within the organisation. So that was a really good starting point, which then led to further things happening within the organisation, and that's referenced in the report that Nina's put together as well. The next step, so appropriately connect with employees and lead by example. As I mentioned obviously on the previous slide, actions, behaviour and communications always support equality, diversity and inclusion, and everyone should show that respect for differences. So whether that's looking at combating or looking at unconscious bias and any sort of prejudice that need to be addressed. And individuals just need to feel comfortable that if they are being dealt with inappropriately, they can stand up and speak. And that's where policies and procedures and training obviously come into the fore. Establishing a sense of belonging for everyone. Again, these probably sound like quite fluffy and nice things to have, but I think that inclusive environment, all of these things people will mention, and all of these things employees will want as part of the organisation. So individuals are going to want to deliver their best when they're at work, and having that connection to the organisation and that psychological contract that I mentioned before will really result in that greater engagement. This kind of culture change, though, as I said, is not going to happen overnight. There isn't a one size fits all, and it's important that you try new things and share your best practice. So, I mean, as you're going on the journey, if things don't work out, own that doesn't happen, be transparent, and then bring everyone along on that journey. Next one. So just picking up, obviously Nina mentioned around looking at your equality and diversity data, but actually having that as your main focus of your programme isn't going to result necessarily in the changes that you're looking for, because meeting quotas doesn't necessarily result in the inclusion piece. Your recruitment goals might boost diversity in numbers, but it won't actually create an inclusive culture. It's really important to take a meaningful, good look at the end-to-end employee experience. So that might be from recruitment, onboarding, to the everyday aspects of work, team building, culture, performance reviews, succession planning, etc. And everything on a daily basis to make sure you do have impact from the work you do around your numbers and quotas, if that's what you want to call them internally. I've mentioned already about inclusion is a culture change. Like we said, it's not something that happens overnight, and people have to adapt to the behaviours they're expecting them to show to their colleagues and day to day, generally dealing with clients or internal colleagues. One of the areas that we've seen quite a lot of training being focused on is micro behaviours. Again, another quote that I like, death by 1,000 paper cuts. Obviously that would be an awful death, and I make light of it, but clearly in an organisational setting, what we're saying is, we're not saying that someone's openly bullying an individual or openly displaying negative behaviour in a way that people might pick up on, but what we're saying is that to create that inclusive environment, those micro behaviours need to be identified. So that might just be little things that people do, not necessarily with any kind of intent, but over time that becomes that death by 1,000 paper cuts for that individual. It's that final straw that broke the camel's back. So it could be as simple as every day they make a cup of tea for a colleague, but not that individual. I mean, for us that might just seem really simple, but for an individual over time that could kind of become a real issue. Or the way that somebody greets an individual in the morning, they're all things that, unless you've got that self-awareness as an individual, you aren't necessarily going to recognise how that impacts an individual. Oh, bear with me, I missed one. Sorry, got ahead of myself. Final piece on this then is really leave your assumptions at the door. So it's really easy and obviously natural sometimes to make assumptions about individuals in the workplace. So we're not necessarily talking always about unconscious bias or wrong conclusions, but we're also talking about behaviours and, as an organisation, what you feel is appropriate for a group of individuals. So it may be that as a as an executive or a senior leadership team, you think that you've got quite a diverse workforce, you've got certain groupings in certain categories, and some initiatives might work for the organisation, but actually it's always best to ask the group of individuals and employees what they would actually work best for them. So that's where we say, obviously the obvious response to that is things like misunderstandings, wrong conclusions, unconscious bias, but it's also about how you approach the programme as well. So I said that I would just quickly show you, just conscious of time, quickly show you an action plan and what one could look like for you, just so you get an idea of maybe how you could structure your routes and going on that journey. So here's an example of, this is obviously just a high level piece, but we can share with you as part of the follow-on email from this, or the more detailed outline of this, giving you all the overview. But you can see here, we've got stage 1, which is obviously the most important area where you're defining your goals and commitment. Obviously, that's giving that overall commitment as a business, like Nina shared with us that we've done at Make UK. Stage 2, ownership and commitment. Again, the same word commitment, but this is ownership and commitment from the senior leadership team, taking the actions that they've committed to do, putting timelines to that, whether that's then working down, as I explained previously, and creating your sectional groups or your working groups that are going to help bring this to life. Stage 3, really, really important, as Nina referred to, reviewing and obtaining your diversity data. Obviously, you can't necessarily make plans until you actually understand that diversity data. As I referenced before, gaining your employees' perspectives on culture. So what is it that they think a good culture looks like? What will work for them? What kind of initiatives do they think you should be bringing forward? That might be an employee survey. Again, some of the feedback that we've had is, oh, we don't want to do an employee survey because people will just say yes to everything. Obviously, with a survey, you would likely have questions that were more focused around which of these would you be most interested in, based on obviously the size of the organisation and what you think is reasonable for you to implement. Policy, process and training, as we said, that's the backbone of a equality, diversity and inclusion action plan. But obviously that isn't the answer. That is just the backbone to support everything that you're doing. Inclusion initiatives, I mentioned those before, but they are clearly the glue that holds everything together. So, looking at cross-sectional working groups, non-minority groups, affinity groups. So you allow individuals who have that affinity, whether that be because of their gender, ethnicity, or just generally they've got an affinity for a certain hobby or topic. You can have listening sessions or events where senior leaders can listen to different viewpoints on big decisions. So those are the kind of things that you might want to do on the inclusion piece. And then finally, the monitoring review. I think this is the most obvious one that people need to always remember as part of the action plan. As Nina referred to, it's not an end game, it's an ongoing piece of work. So obviously reviewing and going back and looking at all of these as you're on that journey is really important, and not forgetting obviously to include your employees in that process, because they'll probably be the best ones to tell you how things are working. So just a quick final refresher of what you can do as next steps. So values, mission and strategy, getting that organizational commitment, looking at your talent, looking at your diverse hiring strategy, which obviously leads from looking at your data, looking at that inclusive culture and connectivity, and measuring that impactful change. And hopefully that's going to lead to your wider workforce engagement and commitment. So that's it from me. Well, back to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Sharon. And if you have got any questions for Sharon and Nina so far, please do be welcome to put them in the Q&A box, which you can see at the bottom of your screen. But now I'll take a short pause just to pull up our poll and get some real feedback from everybody on the call across some of the things we've already discussed, across what your strategy looks like, what you're doing in terms of data collection, what some of the barriers are, and also what are the initiatives that people are already taking. So I'll pause for about a minute or two, and please do fill in the poll, and hopefully we can share what others are doing, as we've got over 100 manufacturers on the call. So it'll be really interesting to see these insights and share those with everybody. And responses starting to flow in, so thank you very much. And I'll give it another 10 or 20 seconds. And I'll stop there and share the results. So starting with our first question around, does your company have a ED&I strategy? Not far from half saying we're currently working on it, but actually really encouraging to see not far off a third have already got one. And I guess there's around sort of another third looking at in the future, or don't have one. Data collection, around half are collecting data about their staff and employees, with about a third annually reviewing that, bearing in mind that not everybody collects their data, but nearly 26% don't currently review their data. But does this actually have an impact on your decision making? 40% saying yes, but again 40% aren't collecting, so can't have it impact on their decision making. In terms of training, and there's strongest answer is 26% plan to train staff within the next 12 months. Quite a few varying responses over the last period about previous training. And what have people done most in terms of that training is clearly e-learning at 61%. And perhaps next at 46% is leadership training, interestingly. Looking at the barriers, which is quite evenly split, but we can see a slight winner with lack of understanding or education, but not at all far behind is culture and tradition, or recruitment and retention. And I think quite a few other issues, not to dismiss as well, in terms of time and resource, what are business commitments as well, but it shows that perhaps the language used and data doesn't appear to be perhaps some of the biggest issues. what steps are you taking? So in terms of initiatives, as we, again, creating a strategy, defining those goals is the biggest. The other things people are doing is senior leadership taking ownership and commitment, training, obtaining those statistics, and again, training for leaders and line managers. And a certain portion of the session we want to speak to our expert team to help them on this matter. So I've stopped sharing the results, and we are also joined by two people this morning. Starting, I think we'll go to you first, Andrew. Andrew's joined us as the Managing Director for Westcombe Engineering, who, safe to say, in our recent conversations, your passion for this topic and what your business is doing clearly came through, Andrew. So I'll let you describe the environment you created at the business and the passion and interest in the topic that you've brought to life, really.
Good morning, Chris. Thanks very much for the introduction. Good morning, everybody. So interestingly, before we kick off, I listened to Nina's presentation with interest and read the diversity data. And Nina, talked a lot about age and gender within the workplace. She talked about ethnic minority, but sadly, disability within the workplace was missing from that data. So it will be interesting to revisit that at some point and generally ask manufacturing, percentage of the workforce do you employ that have a disability. So over here at Westcombe Engineering, Westcombe Engineering was initially started in 1970 by Peterborough Mayor, and his intention was that he would bring disabled adults into the workplace for a period of 6 to 12 months and teach them some skills, give them some knowledge, give them some experience, and then pack them off to the wider industry to fend for themselves and try and get themselves a job within the industry. But sadly, in the 70s and even so today, there seems to be a stigma attached to employing somebody with a disability. And the reasons that I come across frequently are, wow, if we employ someone with a disability, how much is it going to cost us? Is the first obstacle. Second obstacle seems to be, well, if I employ someone with a disability, how do I need to manage them differently? So in both of those answers, it's a no. You don't have to spend massive amounts of additional money to accommodate someone with a disability. If you came to our workplace or our factory, our site, it looks no different to any other subcontractor machinist. We have a disabled toilet. So do many other businesses, workplaces, shops, and we have a ramp that leads up to the reception area, and so do many other businesses, shop fronts in general society. Other than that, we provide nothing different for our disabled workers over here. And we have a combination of disability, both mental and physical. But they're truly talented individuals. And, I've been here now, this is my 6th year, and the business is doubled in size. We supply precision machine parts globally. So not only locally, but globally. And we have several very prestigious customers that we satisfy. Our on-time, our KPIs are fantastic. So our PPM is world-class. Our delivery is world-class. Our on-time delivery is world-class, and that's a credit to our employees that work within our business. So headcount currently is 23, and we operate at 60% or more of our employees have a disability. And the 3 to 5 year plan that I've put in place is that we want to double the size of the business, both in capacity and also a number of employees. And we will maintain that 60 to 65% disability within our employees. The talent pool is incredible. We use partners within the local community, such as our local technical college, Peterborough Regional College. We also use the job centre. 2 programs really. The first one is what's called an internship program, and this is just fabulous for both parties. It offers an adult with a disability the opportunity to gain up to 12 months work experience within our business. There is no obligation for us to pay that individual, and and it's an opportunity for both parties to understand if it's right for both people. And at the end of that 12 months, if it's not right for both parties, then that individual moves on with 12 months worth of work experience, knowledge and expertise to take out into the job field to try and find alternative employment. We actually piloted the very first internship program 4 years ago, and it was a complete success, fantastic success. And the individual is still working with us today, and he's progressing fantastically well through the business to the point where he's actually beginning to learn how to program some of our machine tools over here. So, to you guys out there, to you businesses out there, it is a fantastic opportunity to bring talented individuals into your workplace that can add value and will add value, just given the opportunity to. An analogy that I use quite often with some of our customers and suppliers, if you've got an engineer that's designing an engine part for one of their diesel engines, and that engineer is sitting at his workplace, at his desk in front of his terminal, in a wheeled office chair, what's the difference in that individual sitting in a wheelchair conducting that same piece of work? There's no difference at all, is there, from our point of view? So, we're beginning to, what we want to do is to use our business as a best practice within the manufacturing environment. The door is open for anybody who wishes to visit us and actually see what we do on a day-to-day basis. We've got, as I keep repeating, we've got some incredibly talented individuals. Our longest serving employee here is in his 45th year, never had a day off sick, never been late for work. And I can say that for all of the employees that are within this business, and the majority have been here for 25 years and more, and 30 years and more. So we are classed as a supported business, so we're not allowed to make a profit. Any profit that we do make gets reinvested into the business in new capital equipment or general upgrading of the factory, which is happening right now actually. Chris, is there anything else you'd like me to touch on? Or
yeah, just a couple of things, Andrew. And I said before we started speaking and sharing your story about how passionate you were about it, and I think that's already come across. I just wanted to completely agree, and I think we've had a couple of comments in terms of, this topic is, of course, hugely wide-ranging from gender to neurodiversity, and, of course, anybody that may have a disability, and there's no reason to of course, the whole point is to not see those differences per se. One of the things I just wanted to give you the opportunity to clarify from Lydia was, did you say unpaid internship for 12 months? Why not paid? Because I think you said there was no obligation to do so.
Correct. That's absolutely right. And if that particular individual is claiming benefits with a disability, they continue to receive those benefit payments. And also, if it means that individual needs some help and assistance into getting to work, i.e. transport, then that funding is also available. It is a golden opportunity to bring these talented people into the workplace, sorry.
And the other thing, we've had a pre-submitted question before the session, and I was really interested to catch your views on this. And forgive the question put very sort of neutrally, at what point does positive discrimination become discrimination?
Explain that in a bit more detail.
So I think they mean if you do decide to perhaps look to employ somebody of a different background instead of perhaps the traditional background, at what point the moral dilemma there is, are you that situation, are you discriminating against perhaps the traditional person? If I use the example between somebody of white British background like myself compared to perhaps the BAME community, if you were perhaps ignoring one demographic to target what has been seen as a minority demographic,
okay?
Does that then become discrimination? Is the theory? I think.
Well, here at Westcombe Engineering, what I can say is that we have a completely diverse workforce. We can look at gender, we can look at BAME, we can look at disability. So our workforce is inclusive and totally diverse, and that's how we operate.
Now, I think that's absolutely fair comment. And one of the other things is, I'm hoping if I share my screen, Andrew, is we also have one of your as you said about being a best practice for the manufacturing workplace, is I know you've got some fantastic case studies with regards to the individuals' lives that you've really worked with and improved and given the opportunity to. And this is one young gentleman I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit more about in terms of Kai.
Absolutely. I need to be careful to what level of detail I can delve into Kai's background. But Kai joined us through the Job Centre on a DWP program. So this program differs slightly to the internship program, and there's two parts to this. We took Kai on an 8-week work experience program, and that 8 weeks is an opportunity for him to experience our workplace and for ourselves to experience Kai and to understand if it's a good fit for both parties. Again, that's it's an obligation to pay the individual, and any benefits that Kai was receiving, he continued to receive those benefits. Once that 8 weeks has elapsed, we move on to what we call a 4-week work trial. So at that point, we must guarantee permanent employment after the 4-week trial. So there's 12 weeks altogether where we were lucky enough to have Kai on site for work experience and work trial. If you look, I mean, I'm not going to read the slide out because it's there in front of us, but Kai joined us as a very, very, very shy individual, been let down numerous times in various jobs prior to coming to Westcombe Engineering. And the sad thing is that nobody saw through that shyness. They quite clearly saw his disability, but was not given an opportunity to express his skills, his talents. And we opened up that for Kai when he visited us. And then during that period of time, he has just grown immensely. And, you know, after 16 weeks, he's one of our key personnel. So he works in our goods inwards dispatch department, which is a key critical part. So he's organising stock levels, he's organising stock turnarounds, he's organising assemblies of parts, testing of parts, he's working to customer schedules to ensure he picks the right parts from stock in line with their scheduled demands, packaging in the right quantities, identifying the right parts. It's a very, very complex job. And as I said earlier on, he is one of our key employees now, and we're delighted to have him on board. And as an individual, you can read here now in front of you how much he's changed his life in the 16 weeks that he's now been with us. He was living at home with his auntie. He's now progressed through to he's actually living in his own apartment, so he's paying his own rent. And he's a permanent employee at Westcombe Engineering, and I'm very, very, very proud to have him on board. And from a manager, I talked earlier on the introduction about the dilemma that some businesses and some managers seem to have in terms of, well, how do I manage someone with a disability? Well, I'm pretty old school. Before coming to Westcombe Engineering, I hadn't worked with certainly 60% of the workforce having a disability, but I'm old school. My management skills are very much touch and feel. How are you? How's things? I make a point of talking to everybody in this business several times a day. So to me, it's just basic good management skills.
Absolutely, and to point out the obvious, that the slideshow there is available on Andrew and Westcombe's website, and it's written by Kai himself, and to try and give you a flavour from his perspective as well. And I completely agree with Miranda's comment in the chat box there, Andrew. But incredibly inspiring, and hopefully others can take a lot away from what you said and the experience you've got. But I think very kind to also offer for anyone who wants to find out more. I'm sure you'll be able to share where you are and how to get in touch in the chat to speak to you after this session as well. But thank you very much, Andrew, much appreciated.
My pleasure.
And to hand over to Laura, who is, apologies to give you that to follow, Laura, but I know, as we mentioned,
it's a tricky one.
This is a huge, wide-ranging topic, and as Nina and Sharon mentioned at the beginning, obviously everyone is at a different stage of the journey here, and I wanted to hear from obviously your perspective, which of course will be different from Andrew's. Why is this topic important? And to reiterate, what is GMB, electronic design, doing and has done, and what's your experiences? So over to you, Laura.
Thank you, Chris. And tough act to follow in all cases, I would say this morning. Good morning, everybody. I'm Laura McBrown. I'm Managing Director at G&B Electronics. My sister and I were fortunate enough to take over our family business, and we're a contract manufacturing business offering printed circuit board assembly and electronic product assembly services. So straight away when we took over, we could see that we had a diversity issue. And at that time, the concerns we had around diversity wasn't generally related or anything as forward-thinking as that. It was to do with the average age of our team. Both Kate and myself could see that there were a number of senior managers within the business that were nearing their retirement age, and there was no obvious succession for any of them. In fact, it was clear with the workforce that if we didn't do something about it, we were going to be in trouble with potentially key members all retiring at the same time. As we were new to running the business, we set about trying to understand what we were up against and what 20th century leadership looked like and how we could attract younger people into our business. So what did we learn? Being in the electronics industry, we are lucky enough to get a front view seat of the changes in technology. I've seen resistors, and I'm going to try and do a demonstration now. I've seen resistors go from something that looks like this to something that looks more like this. And if you ignore the holes in this, those little black dots, that's what we're working with these days. I think it's widely agreed that the growth that we're going through as a species is now exponential. And to give you a couple of examples, a gaming console that now has more computing power than the supercomputers of 1996 that powered the governments and major corporations. And I think now a child in sub-Saharan Africa with a disposable phone has more international global communication reach than Ronald Reagan had via the Pentagon during his reign as president. So change and progress is moving faster and faster, and this requires businesses to speed up to adapt. The historic leadership style of command and control will be too slow and will not allow for future expansion or attract the next generation of leaders. Millennials want to make a contribution and do not like to be too tightly controlled. In order to help develop my skills as a 20th century leader, I've been undertaking a course run by a guy called Darren Hardy, and he talks about the millennial generation. I think Nina touched on it earlier. And he shares that back in 1171, it took 514 years for our species on the planet to double in size. More recently, the world population has doubled over the last 4 decades. For many of us, that's within our lifetime. So the reason millennials are so important is because there are just so many of them. And they're coming into their prime spending years and will outweigh the spending power of boomers. They already represent, I think it's 35% of the workforce. Nina, I think you were saying that them and Gen Z are sort of looking like 75% fairly soon. And I think as business leaders, we need to figure out how we're going to try and attract them into our business, because after all, they're our competition and our marketplace. And if we don't know how to sell and recruit them, then we're going to be in trouble. I think we also need to understand how women are affecting the workplace and the market. It won't have escaped anyone's notice how year on year we hear about GCSE results and that girls are outperforming boys. It's also reported that women are responsible for 85% of purchases, not to mention 50% of products marketed to men and purchased by, well, 50% of products marketed to men are purchased by women. But here's the thing, 91% of women do not think that advertisers or companies understand them. So if the market had a gender, it would be female, and that's not just B2C, that's also business to business. Do you have most companies have buyers in their teams who are female? I'm guessing most of people on this call do as well. How do they feel about the suppliers they engage with? And don't forget that 14% of the UK population has got an ethnic minority background, and they have a purchasing power of 300 billion in the UK alone. So do our teams reflect the diversity of our customer base? If we're going to keep up with the speed of change within our marketplace, we need to change our leadership style. If we're going to attract new next generation into our businesses, we need to change our leadership style. And if we're going to successfully recruit on board and lead a team who reflect our customer base, we are going to need to change our leadership style. Human capital is now the most important asset in a company. Who can recruit, lead, and draw out the best talent from their team will win. So what are the skills required to be a 21st century leader and attract the diverse team that you need? Relationship building, outstanding communication, having empathy and understanding, being open, transparent about what you're doing and where you're going, sharing orientated and values driven. So the group of people who more naturally have these skills are women. Let me give you an example. In a family, there's always a peacemaker who acts as the glue that keeps everyone together and manages the emotions of the family. Often this person is the mother. So in the world where we're all competing to attract the best talent, having a nurturing parent on board to challenge, support, understand and develop that talent is key to engaging and retaining those new hires. 5 to 10 years ago, my company, G&B, had an autocratic style of management, a culture of blame, reluctance to share knowledge and record processes into work instructions. There was a strong feeling of them and us, the offices and the shop floor teams, and communication was poor, leading to mistrust between the staff and the senior management. We didn't have a set of company values, and at times bad behaviour was tolerated. Kate and I recognised that if G&B was going to be successful, changing this culture was essential. We needed a leadership team who were going to think and behave differently. During this transition, it was never a decision to try and recruit more women. But once we'd identified what type of leaders we needed within the business, the results spoke for themselves. After 6 years, we're now 50-50 men and women as a business and 50-50 women and men as a leadership team. We're more open with information. The communication of information is leading to greater trust across the team. Our onboarding of team members has significantly improved. Cross-training is more successful. Departments are independently developing their own areas, processes, procedures. Team building activities take place within individual departments without any direction from senior management. And our average age has decreased. Relationships with our customers have improved. And so has our spend from them. In fact, just before our COVID hit us, we'd had our most successful year in our 40-year company history. And I believe that that success was down to the changes that we made in the culture. As well as diversity across gender, over the last 5 years, we've also fluctuated between 5 and 10% LGBTQ. We have team members with physical challenges, as well as dyslexia and autism. I must confess that our area doesn't have a very high number of ethnic minorities, and therefore our numbers there are low. But the key to our successful relationship is that we always hire the best person for the job. None of our team have been hired because of their gender. We hire on merit alone. So for us, this is where inclusion joins the party. A number of the best managers and supervisors we have as part of our team were hiding right under our nose. We took the time as a sort of nurturing parent to understand their skills and what they were doing that was so brilliant and help them to build their confidence and take that next step up. So if I may, I'll share a couple of examples. Kim had been part of our team as administrator for 7 years. And as she opened up and we got to talk to her a bit more, we learned that she'd previously owned her own business, buying and selling printed circuit boards. She'd been a fantastic salesperson, but had lost her confidence and didn't really want a job that involved being on the road any longer. One of our mission statements is exceptional customer service. So as part of this strategy to deliver on this mission, we were going to need a customer service team and someone to head up this team, someone who knew the business and knew the customers. Because of our inclusive leadership style, we were able to identify that the perfect person was right under our nose. The result is when I see our customers, they can't wait to tell me how we're their #1 supplier and how helpful and proactive our customer care team are. This team, led by Kim, have played a significant role in the business and we have received business we've grown from existing customer base. And when I talk to Kim about how she feels that she wasn't really up to this role and that she'd sort of struggled to sort of work out what she was going to do. But now she's mastered it. she feels really proud of what she's achieved. She's built a fantastic team and feels much more like her old successful self. I'd also like to talk to her about a guy called James, if I may. He came to us straight from school after an ultimatum from his mum, whereby he either went back to college or he came to work with her at G&B. He got involved in running and programming some of the production lines, and he sat in the corner of the office just quietly getting on with his work, making sure the machines ran smoothly, no fuss or bother. Was he motivated? Unlikely. Was he going to leave anytime soon? Unlikely. But oh my God, he is so bright. He was completely wasted in that little corner. So we started to talk to him about completing an HNC as a mature student or more mature student. Initially he was against it, but over the subsequent months and a little bit of nagging and a little bit of teasing, he came to talk to me about it. But he was worried about failing and letting the company down and wasting money. So I said to him, James, what if I said to you that I don't want to see your results? What if I said that I don't expect you to be perfect, but if you go consistently, I know there will be things that you will learn and that you'll benefit the company and develop your understanding of what we do. And that's what I'm investing in. As long as you show up and do your best, I'll see the results from myself. A letter on a bit of paper isn't going to change anything. So James took the course. I talked to him about it regularly and how he was finding it. He did confess that he was struggling with the maths. It wasn't easy for him going from GCSE maths back in the 90s to engineering maths at HNC level. But he didn't give up, and I asked him if he would like me to try and organise some extra coaching. He took me up on my offer, and I arranged for one of the smartest engineers I know who does some voluntary work to coach him once a week and help him get his head around the challenge. James achieved a distinction, although he only told my sister Kate about it for fear that I might embarrass him at our all-hands meeting. Today, James runs our engineering team and is responsible for the successful introduction of all new projects into the company. The results that we have achieved are not an exact science and don't happen overnight. But if you're worried about the longevity and future of your business and aren't able to attract and retain younger talent, then perhaps changing your diversity inclusion could be the secret sauce that you're looking for.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Laura. And yeah, absolutely. In terms of investing in people and the breadth of people, I think there are absolutely similar themes to what Andrew was talking about. But as we come to the last 10 or 15 minutes of the session, we've got some time to answer some questions that we've had both before the session from those that have joined us this morning. And if you do have anything else that you want to put on our panelist radar, then please do, as I say, use the Q&A function or the chat box so that I can put them to our guests. The first few things we had pre-submitted was around the training and the types of training that line managers or business leaders could benefit from. And I was hoping, Sharon, you could provide a bit of an overview of the kind of training that Make UK provide and the kind of feedback and working with businesses on this topic, and what do they usually do on training?
Well, thanks, Chris. So yeah, the training side with equality, diversity and inclusion, what I always say to organisations, and I'm sure Laura, Andrew, you might agree with me with your experiences, I think if you say to individuals, we're going to do equality and diversity training, immediately people are on the back foot. They think they're going into a room and they've got to watch what they say, be mindful, and they're going to be told how to behave, how to act, and probably get a little bit of a telling off for the way they've been acting and behaving previously. And I think that's where sometimes training and the way that's approached needs to have a slightly different angle. So the way that we look at training with organisations is very much bring it around to the kind of inclusion and behaviour piece. So when people then come into a training session, it's very much an open session, rather than what people immediately assume is going to be a bit of a telling off, and they're kind of keep your mouth shut and don't say anything in the session. So the types of training we advise is still covering the areas that you would under the banner of equality and diversity, but you would do a programme of training. So if you've got frontline operative staff maybe do a 1 hour briefing to start with, just to give them the principles and the understanding of what you're trying to achieve, and tie that in with your course of principles, values, as opposed to just leading with the Equality Act and the protected characteristics and all the things that put people on the back foot. You will need a separate cohort of training for your managers, because obviously they've got additional responsibilities that they need to be aware of, and picking up obviously the inclusion piece that we've mentioned. They need to obviously lead by example and pick up behaviours and actions that aren't appropriate. And then we always say to make sure you do a separate kind of senior leadership team programme, purely and simply because, maybe less of the day-to-day knowledge and information, but more of that understanding of the key role that they play in the process. So they need to understand and have the same training, essentially an overview, as all of the employee community, but they need to understand the key principles that they bring. I mentioned the micro behaviours piece when in my section, and again, that's an area I'd certainly suggest that when you're looking at training, you pick that up as well. Unconscious bias, a lot of organisations are saying we've done unconscious bias training, but what's next? Now I know that I'm unconsciously biased, what's next? Once you know that and you're aware of that, it's kind of, you move on from that and you look at the behaviours of an individual and trying to push people to be more of an inclusive, rather than be actively aware of equality and diversity, because people then sort of behave differently and behave in a manner that's probably even more inappropriate than maybe they were behaving before. So that's what I'd suggest. E-learning, another good option. It's one that, Make UK, we can offer all of these options and create kind of bespoke training for organisations, but e-learning is a good option. I'd probably steer away from doing that as a first tranche of training if you haven't done it for some time, in order to have the defence for yourselves if you ever have a discrimination claim. I wouldn't say that e-learning necessarily will give you that cover if that's the only training that you've done with an individual. I'd certainly suggest you do some face-to-face training first, where you can cover exercises and various things.
Brilliant, thanks Sharon. And I think it's well worth noting that people like yourself and your team can also help members on the call if they're looking for change programme, consultancy to make some of this stuff happen, going through the steps of a strategy and implementing one that you referred to earlier as well, which we'll be able to share your and your team's details later. But I want to jump back to you, Laura, because one of the other questions we had, and it was around how do we get more women interested or involved in manufacturing, and given yourself and your sister's role within the business, what are your thoughts on that?
I think, there's lots of different levels to tackle this at. I think one of the ones is very early on with the schools. I know we talk a lot about STEM subjects, and when we sort of talk about engineering and manufacturing with younger children, it's often the bloodhound and fighter jets and Formula One cars and things like that. And they aren't necessarily the things that girls are interested in. And I think one of the things that, to think about with that would maybe looking at something that is more related to, or relatable to women. So something like a breast scanner would be an ideal project for young kids and young girls to get involved in. I don't know if I should say this or not, but there is a slim chance that the team of engineers that built the breast scanner originally have never seen a breast. So in terms of any woman that's tried to get into one of those, then I think there is, projects and things that we could do to engage women more around, and young girls around the engineering sector. So I think there's some stuff we can do there. I think we could look at what we're doing in terms of job descriptions and how we word those and what kind of things that women are looking for within roles. I think also if we're looking at how we're changing, how leadership's got to change, and the fact that some of those have more attributes that sort of women have more naturally, then that may attract them as well. So I think it's looking at a whole section of things, and making sure that you understand the women within your own businesses and making sure that you promote them.
Absolutely. And similar kind of trend of thought really, Nina, is I want to give you the opportunity both to kind of follow up on what Andrew mentioned around all the different types of diversity that we can include when speaking to the government on this issue with the sector and supporting our members. But because I know we've obviously focused on women a bit today and a few other areas, but what's kind of how are we going to include some of the things that Andrew said perhaps moving forward? I know you've answered on the Q&A, but I'll give you an opportunity to speak on it as well.
Yes, Andrew, you mentioned a very important point, and we talk about intersectionality, and we mentioned in the report was like one small paragraph. Unfortunately, we weren't able to dive more into details. But when we talk about diversity and when we talk about creating inclusive workplaces, we have to look into the intersectional approach and think about all different kind of people that we have on our shop floors or in our offices. And sometimes we just assume, but some disabilities might be hidden, we might not be aware. So we just need to create the environment and think about everyone and anyone that can feel included, and not necessarily this characteristic are visible for everyone. It's not like a woman or a person from an ethnic background. So this is a very, very important approach, and we definitely need to do more detailed work around this. And I think training around different diversities, different backgrounds of people is very important. About like gender identity, there's quite a lot of like, I'm not, I wouldn't be able to talk about this because my knowledge is not great in that field. But I think if we share the knowledge of people trained around this subject, that will help as well around disability. But we just need to talk about it basically openly.
Sure. And Sharon, we've also had a question in the Q&A about, and I ask you this from a perhaps more legal and HR perspective. I don't know who the anonymous attendee said, I've had people tell me we can state we want to employ a woman, but I believe that would be a discrimination against any men who applied. Can you try and clear that up? And what's the best way to have perhaps an inclusive recruitment policy without perhaps stating something similar to what this person may or may not have been told?
I suppose it depends on the background. I mean, I can't imagine there's very many cases where you can actually specify only a woman would be appropriate for the role. Obviously, there is certain elements of law where you can recruit for a certain ethnicity or a certain type of person, but that's very, very, very few and far between, and we'd obviously strongly suggest against that unless there's a strong reason for doing so. Maybe it's a nurse to a certain ward where there's female patients and they will only have a female nurse or something like that. But obviously we're on a call with manufacturers, so I can't imagine there's many cases where that would be the case. I think it sort of picks up the point that Andrew was that you raised to Andrew as well about sort of positive discrimination. Positive discrimination is probably historically more of a public sector approach where you would positively try and recruit more of a certain type of individual into an organisation to make up your quotas. I think as manufacturing, I'm not sure that that's the approach that individuals want to make. They want the right person for the job, but like you said, Laura, it's looking at the fit for the organisation. So straying away from the legal element, things like personality profiling and things like that. Laura, for your board where you mentioned certain characteristics, I imagine the characteristics that fit with the people you've got would probably have come out in a personality profile, and actually that might be more women than men. So I'd strongly steer away from that approach.
I was surprised if you were going to say otherwise, but I think it's well worth mentioning, of course, but Make UK supporting our members on this, but also as an organisation, Make UK are taking this issue or subject, shall I say, really seriously to improve both the environment for all our staff, but also to lead the way with members on this topic. But I'd like to end with one last question for you, Andrew. And you mentioned you've been at Westcombe for 6 years now and been involved in the fantastic project there. One of the questions we have had is, if you're an SME, where do you start? So if you left, Andrew, and moved to a new or pastures new, where would you start if you joined a business that hadn't done anything on this subject, and how would you go about it? If I can throw that at you, Andrew.
Yeah, of course you can, Chris. So for me, I've had my previous work company actually have approached me to engage in some work in terms of increasing their diversity within the workplace, and it's a corporate business. So it's not a small business; it's a global business. But I guess, you know, I hear this quite often, Chris, and everybody else in the audience. There seems to be, whenever you talk to people, do you know of anybody who I'm short-staffed, I'm looking for someone who's got a genuine interest in manufacturing. There's a completely different talent pool that people are just not exploring. So if I was to leave Westcombe Engineering, which is highly unlikely, because I love what I do.
Hypothetically, of course.
I love the people that I work with, and you know, they've got the difficult part. They've got to conduct their work day in, day out, you know, and we wouldn't be where we are today and where we want to be in 3 to 5 years' time without our talented workforce, without question. But for me, if I was to move somewhere else, then I would continue the work that I've started here and ensure that we engage, a diverse workforce and really take advantage of that hidden talent, because it's just out there and there's loads of it, guys. It's just loads of it. And there's no better time to do it. I forgot to mention this earlier on, but a year and a half ago, the government rolled out a 10-year plan to increase the number of adults with disabilities in the workplace. So there's heaps of funding, there's heaps of help out there, you know, so get on board. Get on board. Don't miss out on the talent that's available.
Absolutely, that's a good point actually around funding, and not just funding, but also supporting organisations or institutions more locally, away from the sector that can support as well. And Make UK can link you in with those organisations when you speak to your regional teams and advisors as well. But no, thank you very much, Andrew, and Sharon and Nina and Laura, for sharing all your expertise and guidance this morning. I think if I can leave everybody that's joined us this morning with one last message or thought for the day, is absolutely what you said, Andrew, about being a growing business. That's I know when we spoke the other day, you bringing new machinery, reinvesting profits, and doubled since you've been there. And that's all from a business that over half the employees will classify as having a disability, but it has in no way whatsoever been a barrier or issue. And actually, it's probably more than anything helped you on that journey of growth. So I think if we can all take that away into our businesses, then it's well worth this session this morning. So thank everybody for joining us. It's also worth noting that if you are looking for support in consultancy for change management program or training that Make UK can support, and we will share a recording of this session and the presentation slides as well moving forwards. But thank you very much, and I will bid everyone a farewell and have a fantastic day.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Bye-bye.